Okay, Kathleen, you can see the presentation, right?
Yes, I can.
Brain run, prep, and seed starting. Okay, good. Okay, you see the screen going forward, backward. Okay.
Unfortunately, then they put all those. Okay. So we're all just about. Cancel that out over now. So this is all set.
Oh, okay. I'm pretty much.
Just go right toward that.
Yeah.
If you don't mind, I have the window.
Right.
You can talk to her. You don't
I know.
see it.
Okay.
And again, this.
Yep.
For that. And I'll just,
Remember, my father's name was Don.
Oh, okay. Yeah, if other people should come, they'll line up down there.
Hi, everyone. How you doing on this kind of drizzly, damp, typical April day? But our April showers hopefully bring May flowers. So we'll see how we do. Hopefully we do well. I wasn't sure. I delivered meals at lunchtime and it was pouring rain and I thought, I wonder if anybody's gonna come this afternoon. So I'm going to talk to you. How are you? Come on in. I'm going to talk to you today about spring garden prep and seed starting. And I walked this around and I'll actually pass it. About a week ago, 7 to 10 days ago, it was definitely after St. Patrick's Day because we got St. Patrick's Day cupcakes in this. I wanted to show you how easy it was to start seeds. And so all I did was I poked some holes in the bottom of the muffin tin. I put a little seed starting soil in it, and I poked some snow pea seeds in it. Then I put it on my windowsill with the lid closed, so it had a humidity dome. And that's what we have in 10 days. So I just wanted to show you how very simple it is to start some seeds, and to pass that around to you. So I'm Donelle Denery, I'm a master gardener. I've been doing this for 10 years. I really enjoy coming. I think I've spoken for every council on aging on the Cape, but I live in Eastham, so I particularly like coming here. And just, you can ask questions as we go. And the same on Zoom, you can shout out a question if you'd like, Kathleen. So we'll see how we go. And at the very end, if we have time, you can ask me general gardening questions. If I can answer them, I will. And we'll see where we go. How's that? Okay, so this is one of my most important tips, and I really almost always start my programs with this. And it's about keeping a garden journal. It doesn't have to be anything more than a pad. You know, it can be anything. I see some of you writing here. But the types of things I keep in there are what grew well, what did I particularly like, what didn't grow well that I don't want to grow again. Are there some things in my garden, like my perennials or my shrubs, that aren't doing well? And they're candidates for what I call garden editing, moving them somewhere else. So those are the types of things I keep in the journal. I also clip in, if I've bought perennials or shrubs, I clip in the tags, and on the tags, I write the year so that I know who I planted that tree in 2020 or whenever it was. And I like that because then I have the varieties. And if something really grew well, maybe I want to grow it again, or maybe a friend or neighbor comes over and says, oh, I really like that, what's the variety? And I'm not too good at remembering the variety of everything, so that helps me out. I also like to put the date I planted things. And for my vegetable garden, I usually put my garden plot plantings. I don't know if I've ever had, here, I can thank you. I don't know if I've ever had a year with my vegetable garden that I've planted exactly the same way. I hope all of you on Zoom can see that. So that helps me because then the next year I go, something did well there and something else didn't. And things I know were, you know, the beans didn't do very well because something else grew so high, they didn't get enough sun, so don't do it again next year. Those are the types of things I do in a journal. Also, if you have heirlooms, and this could be heirloom tomatoes, it could be heirloom annuals. I know if I want to keep the seeds. I have some marigolds that I love that are heirlooms, and every fall I go and I take some of the seed pods and I keep them for the next year and I start to grow them. So it's often very good to know whether something is an heirloom or not, because if it's a hybrid, you don't want to collect the seeds from it, no matter how tasty that tomato was. If it's a hybrid, you collect the seeds, it's going to go back to one of the parents, and it's not going to be the tomato you've had in your garden this year. So don't keep hybrid seeds. The other things that I collect are, I love going on the garden tours, and often I docent in gardens, but I try to get to some also. That's where I met Joan, right? And there's almost always something in a garden that I go, I like how they did that hardscape, or I like that particular plant. And I write it in my journal and go, next year I want to try to get that. Last year, I saw the most beautiful white lace cap hydrangea. It's called Haas Halo, and it is actually a native.
And if you think of our mop head hydrangeas, you never see a bee on them because they're sterile. Well, Haas halo is actually fertile, and they were covered with bees. It was wonderful. So I'm gonna see if I can get one of them this year. Then I keep month by month notes, like December and January, or when I do my inventory of my seeds and say, okay, what do I need to buy this year? And I order them. Every year, the seed catalogs seem to come earlier and earlier. I think they're gonna be out before Thanksgiving next year, but they do come early. And then in February, I prune my fruit trees. That's the time to prune fruit trees. And if you have blueberries or raspberries, any of the berry plants, that's the time to prune them also. March and April, I start my seeds, as you can see here. Typically, I would say I don't start peas in the house because those are good right in the ground. Yes.
I'm just wondering, is it possible for us to get a printout of, is this your,
Um,
or an email of it, or?
I know John usually posts it,
Okay.
so I think you can probably then take notes off of posting it.
Thank you.
And I have no objection if you want to take your cell phone and take a picture of a particular slide.
Thank
But I think he will post this. I have no problem with that whatsoever. So, again, with the journal, I always try to look at the garden with a critical eye. Are there candidates to be moved? And I think about, where do I want to move them to? I have a couple of caniculate hydrangeas that haven't bloomed in 3 years. Obviously, they're not getting enough sun. I need to move them to more sun. So is something too big or too small? Do I have to, if it's too small, move it forward in the garden, or too big, move it to the back of the garden? Or sometimes a plant will take over a garden. I have evening primrose, which is the most beautiful yellow flower early in the season, but it's like taking over the whole flower bed. So I'm either going to give some to plant sales, or give some to neighbors, or just get rid of it. And if it didn't do well, I think about, did it get too much sun? Did it not get enough sun? Did it get too much water? Did it not get enough water? Why didn't it do well? And there are some plants that I don't know why it is, but there are some plants that just don't do well on Cape Cod either. And I have tried to grow sweet cherries for years. They never do well, so I've given up. So, okey doke, let's see. So now on to spring garden prep. Your general cleanup. And I would say to you, it is better to do as much of your cleanup in the fall as you possibly can before the spring. And the one kind of exception to that is there are some beneficial insects that like being in leaves. So I get fanatical about removing leaves, but I always leave some around the insects. But the more you can clean up in the fall, the better off you are. So a lot of these tasks I'm going to talk about, hopefully you did in the fall, but if you didn't, you'll do it in the spring. So on hydrangeas, on your macrophilias, now these are the big mop heads. These are your classic blues that we love on the Cape. I think it's our Cape Cod plant. Most of these bloom on old wood. Some of the newer varieties, such as Endless Summer, bloom on both old and new wood. A couple years ago, we got a really, really cold night in the winter, and it killed most of the buds on our blue hydrangeas, and the only ones we saw were on the ones that bloom on new wood, and even then they weren't great blooms, but they were some. So you want to cut anything that's old and dead out, but you want to leave the new wood because that's where you're going to get the blooms. And in the fall, after the blossoms fade, cut the flowers just above the first leaf node. And I try to cut it on an angle. And the reason I try to cut it on an angle is if you cut it flat, when it rains, the water is going to go into it and cool and sometimes cause the fungus. So I try to do my cut, when I cut the flowers off, I try to just above the first leaf node, do a diagonal cut. You can, did we have a question on Zoom? No, okay. And I prune after the leaf drop. And really, it's even better to do hydrangeas in the early spring. And hydrangeas like good air circulation. Some people say to me, my hydrangeas were great for 3 or 4 years, and they're big and I get lots of leaves, but I don't get a lot of flowers. The reason is because they're not getting enough air circulation. So every 2 to 3 years, what you want to do is, in the spring, when you can see the stems, you go into the hydrangeas and you take out about 1/3 of what I call the oldest wood. Now, the oldest wood is going to be the stems that are the thickest. And when I say you take them out, you cut them as close to ground level as you could. And you may look at that and say, oh my goodness, I really chopped up the plant. But let me tell you, you're probably going to get better blooms out of it because you've given it more air circulation. So that's a good way to do it. All right. So here, this is a picture of the general cleanup of one of those hydrangeas. And you can see how some of the dead wood has been cut out. You know, it's cutting it at the bottom. The flowers, after the flowers fade, you're taking it just above that leaf node. And that's the right way to prune a mop-head hydrangea.
Can you leave flowers on your hydrangea?
Yeah, some people do. Some people do. They like the look of them. One of my neighbors did a snowman and they took the dried hydrangea blossoms and put them on for hair. That was so neat this winter. We don't always get enough snow, we can do that, but yeah, you can do it in the spring.
Our hydrangeas start out like that picture of the blue one there that you had. But as soon as they reach full blossom, they all flop over. Like the stems are too small.
Yeah.
What happens there?
You know what, it's the variety that they are. A lot of the older varieties do that. The newer varieties tend to have stiffer stems. Now, one thing that you can do is, you can get a little bit like a 1-foot wire fencing and sort of put it around the bottom so that it helps hold those stems up.
Okay.
But it's usually the variety if they flop over. The newer varieties are bred to have the stiffer stems, but some of the older varieties, which sometimes are the ones that bloom the best, but the blossoms get heavy. Also, a heavy rain will sometimes do that.
Yeah.
If we get a real heavy rain when they just come into full bloom, any one of them will flop. So, okie doke, let's see where we're at. Okay, the paniculate hydrangeas are the ones that look like they have a cone shape to them. And they bloom later in the year. And there are some that now come in smaller varieties. There are a bunch of them that come in smaller varieties, like Bobo is one of them. That comes as little Bobo or little wineland. So there are smaller varieties. Now, the paniculas bloom on new wood. So if your plant has gotten too big and rangy, you can cut it way back. When I say way back, usually you don't do more than 1/3, but I have seen some people do it almost to 1 foot and they still come back and they come back nicely. And you can either prune them after leaf drop in the fall, or you can prune them at this time of year before they start to leaf out. Shrubs. I don't know if any one of you have 9-bark. 9-bark is shown up in the top right. I particularly like that shrub. It can get very big. It has very inconsequential flowers. that picture makes it look like, ooh, those are good flowers, but they really aren't. They're not consequential. But what I like about it, it's got a really dark leaf. And it looks really nice in with a lot of other green things, but it can get very tall. And every couple of years, I just cut it to 2 foot in the fall. And by the time it's midsummer, it's back at 4 or 5 feet. You can just cut it really far. Other deciduous shrubs, you can remove the dead wood. You can shape them some. One you do not want to do that to is Harry Lauder's walking stick, which you see on the bottom left. It's got real curly limbs to it. That is not anything special during the summer, but at this time of year or in winter, it's spectacular because it's so curly and so interesting to look at. With evergreens, prune out your dead wood. You can prune them for shape, and often less is more. I have a bird's head spruce or bird's nest spruce that for some reason had a lot of winter kill at ground level, and I'm going to try to prune it out, but I'm wondering if the plant has a goner, and I'm not sure if it is. So sometimes with evergreens, less is more.
Excuse me, is that native, that walk thing?
The Harry Lauder walking stick,
Yes.
it is not a native, but it does very well on Cape Cod.
Thank you.
So, general cleanup. Remove all leaves and weeds, and I talked about, you might want to leave some leaves for the beneficial insects, but I can tell you the one thing that, not this winter, but the winter before, which was rampant, was chickweed. And you see chickweed up in that top corner. It's green, it grows all winter, and it's starting to bloom now, which means in 3 or 4 months, we're gonna have more of it. And what I actually did, I had so much the winter of 23, I must have spent 30 or 40 hours pulling out of the garden in the spring. I had so much of it. So what I said, I always put down in the flower beds, I put down a pre-emergent weed control, which means it suppresses anything new that will grow up. And what I did in October is I put down pre-emergent. I have almost no chickweed this year. So it was worth doing that.
Does chickweed look like, I don't know, I had this stuff that wasn't weed in my garden. I thought it was parsley at first, but it didn't have the smell of parsley. And I took a picture of it and showed it to my son-in-law, and he said, that's a weed, get rid of it. It was all over the garden. I mean, I spent about 6 hours trying to get the small, it was all.
Was it a little more silvery than parsley? Because there's a weed that almost looks like parsley. I'm not sure, I had to see a picture of it. But yeah, there's some winter weeds. Okay, vegetable gardens, and I said, this is best done in fall, but if you haven't done it, remove all the debris from the previous year. Carefully remove last year's dead foliage on things like horseradish root or asparagus. And in your perennial beds and shrubs, cut back and remove anything that's dead, but don't cut the living. Again, prune back to a leaf node. Refresh vegetable gardens. I was just talking to this one lady about it. Especially raised beds, but also in general, if you have vegetable gardens in the ground. Here, because our soil is so sandy, it's not once and done with compost. It's really once a year. And so you always want to refresh the top portion of your veggie garden every spring. I usually work in some composted cow manure. If it is a raised bed and you want the soil in a raised bed to be very light, like this lady was saying, the raised bed is like 7 by 3. I try to, usually the soil compacts over the winter a little bit, but you want to be adding like 2 or 3 inches at the top. And I usually use the bagged composted cow manure. some regular compost, which you can get in bags also, and either vermiculite or perlite, which makes it a little bit lighter. What I do is I take a pitchfork and I pitchfork it in, because you don't want that soil to be compressed. You want it to be white and fluffy for your vegetables when you plant them. So I work that into the top 6 to 12 inches of soil. I do it every year. If I have forgotten to put down some lime in the fall, I add a little bit of fast-acting lime, which is the powdery one, not the pelletized. The finer the grain, the faster lime works. And I'll add that if I forgot to do it in the fall. If you have grow bags, and I've shown grow bags down here in the bottom right, I typically will take the top half of the soil out and add it to my compost pile, and then I'll use that same mix I was just talking about for a raised bed in the top half of it. And grow bags are great. I was just looking in my garden. I think I'm gonna get rid of a couple of them, but I've had them for 10 years. They last a really long time. And it allows you to have an extension of your garden space. If they're not real big, you can pull them to follow the sun. You do have to be careful because they will dry out faster than plants in the ground. It's above ground, and you're gonna lose some of that moisture that are in there. So they have a higher water need than in the ground. But the nice thing is most of them come in just plain black. You can get them in different colors. I just get black, it's the cheapest. The black attracts the sun and they warm up faster than what you have in the ground. So often things that you plant in a grow bag will grow faster than what you have in the ground. They catch up what's in the ground eventually. So on refreshing and perennial beds and trees and shrubs, I go around and I fertilize everything. What do I use? There are so many different fertilizers out there. Personally, I like anything that's in the espoma line, like plant tone, polytone. They're all organic, which isn't the most critical thing if it's a tree or a shrub, but I like them. You know, I go around, I put them at the base of the plant or out to the drip line. I take like a little trowel, like a fork trowel, and work it into the soil a little bit. So I fertilize everything. Everything needs food, and I add some mulch. I only top dressed if I have mulched the year before. You don't want to smother everything. I only top dressed maybe about 1 inch. If it's new, then I'll put 2 to 3 inches in. But what you do not want to do is what you see in the bottom right there that some landscapers do. They make like Mount Vesuvius, and they make like a mountain going up the tree. That's going to kill the tree. What you want is you want it to be at ground level. You want it to be at ground level. And with mulch, what it's helping with is helping suppress your weeds. And it also is helping you retain the moisture. Now, there's a couple of things that you don't want a lot of mulch on. And the two things that immediately come to mind are peonies and irises. They are plants that are tubers, and irises, my irises, you can actually see the top of the tubers at the ground level. And the peonies are maybe 1/2 inch under the ground. If they are down too thick, and that's what happens if you put year after year after year of mulch on them, they're not going to bloom. And why do we grow iris and peonies? We grow them for the flowers because they're so beautiful. But they don't like a lot of mulch on them. They want to be pretty much right at the surface. And as I said, as I pointed out, the too much mulch, your trees, you do not want the mulch above the flare. And the flare is when the stem comes down, the main trunk, and it starts to spread out. That's the flare. So you don't want it above the flare. Blueberries. I think I mentioned this before. I prune in late winter, like March, before the first leaf bud, and I take out the dead wood and I fertilize them before the leaves emerge. And I use the same fertilizer as azaleas and rhododendrons. They're acid-loving plants. That's why they do well on Cape Cod. With raspberries, again, I prune them at the same time of year. March is ideal. I cut out all the canes that fruited last year because they will not fruit again this year. Most of them will look gray and a little bit dead. And I prune out all but 3 or 4 canes per plant because again, they want some air in there. I leave the thickest that has lots of buds and no side shoots. Again, raspberries are like blueberries, they're acid loving. They love a nice shot of polytone. Grapes. I'm almost sorry we put in grapes. I didn't realize how fast grapevines grow, but they grow tremendously fast. And I've now given them over to my husband to take care of, but they need to be severely pruned in February. If you ever want to grow grapes, go up to the vineyard that's in Peru, Provincetown, because they love to give tours and show you how they prune and train them. My husband's been up there a couple of times, but grapes, I'm amazed how fast they grow. Fruit trees, again, I prune in late winter, late February, early March, before they start to leaf out and bud. And I start to spray them every 3 weeks, starting in late March. And that was a challenge this year because we had so much rain and so much wind, because you don't want to spray them on a windy day. You don't want to spray them when it's gonna rain in a half hour. So my first time I sprayed was last week.
What do you spray them with?
I sprayed them with a general garden, a fruit tree, general fruit tree. It's like a fungicide, etc. As it gets further in the season, I usually use copper, which is organic, and I'm also using that on my tomato plants. And then my squash and cucumbers and things like that. It's a good fungicide, and it's organic. Garlic should be planted in the fall. It drives me crazy when I go in garden centers and I see them in the spring selling garlic. You will get 1 clove of garlic when you plant it in the spring. It needs that cold of winter to set its cloves. So in the fall, I cover my garlic, and I usually do that with straw, which is hard for me to find because there aren't many horses or cows around. So I use C-rack. And what C-rack is it's I don't even know what to call it. But
Dead
it's like,
stuff.
yeah, dead stuff. It's like, it's like the seagrass that now is died and it washes up on the shore. Yeah, exactly. And some people think you can't use that because it's got a lot of salt in it. The salt is actually a nutrient. And so it's actually good as a top dressing on things like garlic. So I just walk down, I fill up my garden with some C-rack, I bring it up, I throw it on the garlic. Now this spring, because this winter was crazy. I mean, it wasn't as super cold as it was a couple years ago, but it was cold. Then it was warm. Then it was cold. Then it was warm. It was like this crazy winter for temperature. It's like a roller coaster. And I pulled the C-rack off. There was not an inch of garlic above the ground. And one of my friends that lives in Chatham goes, "Oh my goodness, all my garlic died. I don't have any garlic coming up." And I said, "Well, listen, sister, neither do I. But I am betting now that I pulled the top dressing off and it's getting a little warmer, and sure enough, the garlic is up 3 or 4 inches." So, it wasn't that it died, it was just that it was the crazy year. And with garlic, I like to fertilize it, and this comes from, my dentist is Dr. Chung in Orleans, and he's like he's the garlic man. at the Orleans Farmers Market. I think he told me he's growing 68 varieties of garlic now. I didn't know there were 68 varieties of garlic. But he told me use a combination of bone meal and blood meal. And so that's what I've been putting on my garlic. And I figure his garlic is beautiful. So if it's good for him, it's probably work for me. So that's what I've been using on that.
When do you fertilize the garlic?
I fertilize it as soon as I plant it. And then I do a midwinter fertilization of it, which is a little tough because you got the top dressing on it, but I just kind of throw it on the top. And then when I pull the dressing off, I give it a good shot of fertilizer then. You can actually, Dr. Chung says he does it even more often, that he does it almost every month. But again, he's growing it for a farmer's market, so it's a little bit different than if you're growing it for home.
Water garlic.
Do you have to water garlic through the winter, are you asking?
No.
No, we're getting enough rain for it to grow. You know, generally in spring, I mean, we haven't had a super dry spring. It's been about a normal spring, rain, so it's okay. It's all right. Another thing that I would say is, especially for vegetable gardens, consider a high quality landscape fabric. I have a picture of it up in that top corner. I'm not talking about the black plastic, talking about the woven one, and it has stripes every foot. And that will last me in the garden 8 or 9 years. Usually I get sick of where I put holes in it and say to my husband, I want to put down new before it wears out. But what it does is it suppresses the weeds because it is woven. It allows the rain to go through it. So it keeps the moisture in. It almost works like a mulch. It retains the heat and it reduces some of the soil compaction because when you're walking on it, you're walking on the landscape fabric, not the soil, even though the soil is below it. And the high quality is expensive, but it lasts a long time. I've sometimes used it for 5 or 6 years. It's made from recycled materials and it's porous because it's woven. I mulch plants that are in rows, and by rows, like peas, you know, I'm putting them in a row, or my asparagus, or the garlic. I mulch that. I also mulch the top of my grow bags, with whatever I'm putting in the grow bags. And again, it helps suppress weeds and retain the moisture. Here's a good picture of landscape fabrics. We were putting it down one year. Sequoia Farms, the community garden. When I lived in Orleans and was a conservation commissioner, I managed Sequoia. And we used it at Sequoia in the pathways that we walked on, so there'd be no weeds there. But you can see, all you need to do is, like in that bottom left, you just cut a little hole and you plant your plant in there.
Where do you get that?
I get it online, but somebody told me Home Depot, the big box stores carry it too. I wouldn't be surprised if the garden centers sell it also. But it needs to be woven and make sure it's got the stripes in it. 3 ounce, 5 ounces, even better, but 3 ounces is fine. And it lasts a long time. My husband actually takes, there's wires you use if you have a suspended ceiling to hold the ceiling up. Actually takes that and cuts that and moves the stakes to hold it down.
Can you explain what a grow bag is?
Oh, sure. Let me see if I've got a picture. Where did my grow bag go? It's that bottom right.
So it's actually a bag?
It's actually a bag. You know, I usually bring it and I kept saying, don't forget, please, don't forget.
So you buy it empty?
And they come flat. I usually buy them off Amazon, but you can buy them in the garden center. They come flat, they come in different sizes, small, medium, large, different depths. They're like a felt, like a real heavy, strong felt.
Is it better than a pot?
It won't be as decorative as a pot, but it's a heck of a lot cheaper,
Okay.
heck of a lot cheaper.
You mulch tomatoes or vegetables, what do you mulch them with?
See, I'm using that landscape fabric where the veggies are, so I don't mulch them because I've got that landscape fabric down, but I have a garden, I have grow bags off the back deck of my house right outside the kitchen, and I call it my kitchen cutting boards. I have my herbs in there, and I put a few cherry tomatoes too. I do put mulch in the grow bag, the regular mulch. Yeah, just plain old, don't buy the colored mulch because that has a dye in it. So just buy natural mulch. Let's see. Okay, that's a picture of my veggie garden. I have, you can see with the wood, that's a, raised bed that's probably about that high, and I think it's 3 foot wide. I tend to put, this is a screen that you're seeing right there, that I let some of the, squash go onto. Over on the far left is the end of my asparagus, as it's come to summer and it's now ferning. And in the ground, I've got peppers and eggplant and plenty of tomatoes. So that's what it looks like. Okay, soil pH is really important, especially because we were talking about how sandy our soil is here. And you're gonna see a picture in a minute of why it is so important. Our native pH on Cape Cod is 5 because it's very acidic, but desirable for most vegetable plants is 6.2 to 6.8, with optimum being 6.5 to 6.8. Now lime increases the pH, which is what I said in my veggie garden. I do put down lime in the fall. If I've forgotten, I put it down in the spring. But lime sometimes will take, especially the pelletized, 3 to 6 months to work. But the finer the grind, the faster it works. If you are on town water, and if you are watering your blue hydrangeas with town water, they may turn pink. And the reason is because our town water is pH neutral. And when I was in Orleans, the first year or two, I had beautiful blue hydrangeas. I was on Orleans town water and they all turned pink. I didn't want pink hydrangeas, I wanted blue hydrangeas. So sulfur reduces the pH. So if you have hydrangeas that are being watered on town water and they are tending to turn pink, you can use sulfur. You can have your soil tested by the Cape Cod Cooperative Extension for a very nominal fee, or you can send it to UMass Amherst. They will send you like a little box kit to mail it. And the one from UMass Amherst not only tells you the pH, but also gives you some of the beneficial minerals that you may need. And I don't know how expensive that is anymore. I think it's about $20 from UMass. I'm not sure how much the master gardeners are, but it's very reasonable. Here are typical optimal ranges for some veggies, and what I want to show you is really this. Here, this line on the left, this vertical line on the left that's heavy, that's our native pH there. But look where our optimum is for our vegetables. That's why testing your pH is so important, and why using some compost and some lime, making sure your soil is conditioned, is so important for getting good plants and getting good veggies. So I always say this is very, very important. Again, this is what I was talking about with the pH. If you're on town water, it's 7. you're gonna be more in that pink zone. The more acidic it is, the bluer they'll be, almost to the point of being purple in some cases. Okay, now we're gonna talk about seed starting for a few minutes. Because I said now was the right time of year to talk about this. Some seeds need stratification. We may say, what is stratification? Stratification is really something that occurs in nature with seeds that overwinter and get a cold cycle. There are some common seeds that need that. Milkweed that is so important to the monarch butterflies, butterfly weed, coneflowers, lupins, larkspur, lavender, they all need stratification. Good news is none of them are fish. Those are all more ornamental. But stratification is the process, you can read that, of pre-treating seeds in order to stimulate natural conditions that seeds would experience in the soil over winter. And you can stratify seeds by putting them in like a moist paper towel in a plastic bag in your refrigerator for a couple months. I have a couple friends that do that. I do every year put down more butterfly weed seeds. I know they need the cold, so what I do is in February, early February, I go out there, I scratch some of the seeds. Right, butterfly weed. This year I'm doing an experiment. My coneflowers, I kept the heads. I left them in the garage to see if the garage was going to be cold enough to stratify them, and I'm going to sprinkle them in the garden to see.
So I just take my coneflower seeds and break them up and put them right in the garden.
You're
in the fall.
stratifying them.
Right.
Yeah, you're stratifying them because
Flowers.
coneflowers are echinacea.
Like
They-
that, Susan.
they're like a daisy, that they can be the orange with the black center, but a lot of times they're like pink or purple. They're really popular in gardens and they're great and they're native. So, but yeah, that's the other thing, you just
Yeah.
sprinkle them in the garden, and I've done that too. So I had a particular place I wanted to see if I could get them to grow, which is why I brought them in the garage. But yes, in the fall, you can just take the dried heads.
Do they look like a little circle?
Yeah, in the center they do. Oh, but when
Somebody
they
gave,
flower-
somebody gave me a whole bunch of, they look like a little circle, but she told me the name and then I forgot the name.
that sounds more like,
She said I could just kind of
spread them around.
spread the dirt and then just spread it all over the place and they'll grow, but I don't know what they are. So I don't know.
And after summer.
Well, I didn't do that. It's still in my fortune. I'm like, what am I gonna do with them? My husband keeps yelling at me saying, are you gonna do something with these?
Yeah, my husband keeps trying to throw the ones that are in the garage out. I keep
And I'm
saying,
just,
don't
they
throw
look
them out.
like a cone and I'm thinking, maybe that's what
Yeah,
I
they're
have.
called coneflowers. They're called coneflowers, so, you know, that might be what they are, so, yeah, I know. It's hard. Life is tough. I get stuff, I leave stuff out, it gets thrown away. Okay. There are certain seeds that you typically grow right in the ground. And you start them at the time of the year on a seed pack. Some of the things, and I'm talking now about veggies specifically, some of the things that you grow right in the ground that you don't bother to do something like this with is squash, peas, beans, lettuce, garlic, which should be planted in the fall, onions and sunflowers. The garden centers have plenty of onion sets right now. Perfect time to put in onions. You want to put in onions or leeks. Leeks, it's great to put leeks in now. I grew leeks one year. They took up so much room. I said, it's easier for me to spend a couple dollars and buy a leek in the store than grow them. Seeds to start in early March. These are seeds that I would be starting in the house. And I'm going to show you some of the things that I use to start in the house. But peppers and eggplants take a long time to germinate, a long time to get big. Things I start in late March in the house are herbs and annual flowers such as marigold. I start in late March. And then my tomatoes, I start in early April, because if I start them before that, they get too big and leggy before I plant them in the ground. There are certain things, peas are one, that benefit from what's called an inoculant. And an inoculant is the process of adding effective bacteria, beneficial bacteria to the host plant seed before planting. Now, you don't have to do that, but if you are starting peas with a compost mix, I would suggest that, because the compost mix doesn't have the bacteria in it already. In the ground, it probably has the bacteria. So every year, a friend and I buy a little pack of inoculant. You mix it with a little water, you put the seeds in the water, and up they sprout. These, even though it's in a commercial seed starting mix, they did not have inoculant, and they're doing just fine. So if you've got it, fine. If you don't worry about it. Okay, how to start seeds. The ideal setup is to have an LED full spectrum light. Now you can use fluorescents. Fluorescents cost a lot more with electric. I don't know about any of you, but we almost had sticker shock when we saw the increase in the electric bills, with the rate increase they had. So full spectrum LED, 16 hours a day. And they sometimes say grow lights. Lights are full spectrum. You don't necessarily have to pay the premium for a grow light. And I use a heat mat, which I leave on 24 hours a day underneath things. And I apologize to those of you on the internet, but if you're looking at the picture in the center, I do have where the heat mat is marked. There's my seed tray, and there's a picture of what a seed mat looks like over on the right, and they last a long time. I just replaced one of mine that was probably 15 years old. There are a bunch of different seed trays you can use, and this one on the top left is probably the most typical. It's got a dome, it's got a black waterproof base, and then it's got little slots inside. You know, guess what? It's pretty much like my cupcake tin, except a little bit smaller. So, and these are very reasonable to buy. They are now selling them with adjustable humidity that you see on that top right. I've never used them before. And now I see that they have with a light in it. And I actually, for the heck of it, bought a couple of them this year. Next year I'll tell you if they worked or not. So, but I do have to still put them on a heat mat. But your kind of your low tech is either, you know, your things that you recycled from the kitchen, or that dome. Personally, my favorite way that I like to grow my tomato plants are with those peat pellets. You see them on the top right. They're like little things, and you put them in water and they expand, and put the seed in them. They do great. I can usually get them almost to the point where I need to transplant them by doing that, and only transplant them once. And there are also, I have that friend I mentioned in Chatham. She is a good gardener, but she was always struggling getting seeds to start in the spring. And she said, I don't know, I have a brown thumb with seeds. And I said to her, okay, buy a hydroponic garden and start your seeds that way. She did. She now has 4 of them. Can't believe it, but she loves it. I do have one. This is mine that you're seeing in the center. Its name brand is Aero Garden, but lots of people sell them. And they sell commercial little sponges. You put the seed in it. I take a clear plastic bag, I slit it, and I make like a humidity dome just to give it a little more humidity. There's a down in the bottom, there's water, and there's nutrients that you put in it. And the one thing I would say, if you're going to use a hydroponic, you need to use a hydroponic fertilizer because it's in water. So it balances the nutrient mix. But that's the other way that I grow them. And actually, what I've got growing in there are my peppers and my eggplants, because they take so much longer to sprout. This is the DIY that I showed you by this. You know, there's lots of things. I just simply put it on my windowsill with a catch tray underneath it, since I didn't want to get my windowsill wet and have my husband yell at me. But you know, you can use anything, cupcake, rotisserie, chicken, leftover, takeout container. You use almost anything. Somebody said, you know, you can use milk carton. You know, the egg one plastic or styrofoam ones are good, but you can use the cardboard ones too. The one thing is you need to poke holes in the bottom, and I saw a couple of you feeling them. I did poke holes in the bottom so that excess water could go through it. So that's important. But you know, these are great because they have a built-in humidity belt. So kind of the DIY way to do it. I always water the weak fertilizer solution on my seeds. Now, not the hydroponic. I said the hydroponic, you need to use the hydroponic solution. And there are many products available. The one that I always buy, and I buy it by the gallon, is Neptune's
Harvest. Neptune's harvest.
yeah, it's fish and seaweed. Fish and seaweed. It stinks. Every time I start them, I start in the cellar. The first time after I started the seeds, my husband goes down in the cellar and goes, "Doggone it, a mouse died down there. It stinks down there." And I always go, "It's the fertilizer." "Oh, okay, it's the fertilizer." So it does have a smell, but I make a really weak solution of it. I keep it in a bucket, and that's what I keep watering everything with right up to the time that I plant it in the ground outside. Seedlings will outgrow their initial container. I mean, I'm gonna sow my seeds out, my snow peas outside actually this Sunday. But these I can put right out, but generally, like your tomatoes, my marigolds, the eggplants, they will get too big for the container they're in. So what you need to do is you need to up pot them. And the important thing, and I think this is where my friend in Chatham was going in, having a problem. She wasn't having a problem germinating the seed. She was getting die-off when she transplanted because she was putting them in too big of a pot. The rule of thumb is you either double or triple the size of the initial container. So, you know, if you look at this muffin tin, it's maybe what, 2 inches by 2 inches? So you probably wouldn't be doing more than 4 inches by 4 inches as a container to do the next transplant. Because when you do it too big, it's too hard to control the water. And if the roots are starting to come out of the bottom, I think you guys, I don't want to see how, these are points that they could be transplanted over here, and hopefully at home you can see that because it's got a nice root structure in the bottom. And this is the point where this really should be transplanted, but it will go in the ground. Very important, sometimes with my tomatoes, I have to transplant them twice before I plant them in the ground. But you need to harden off your plants, particularly the vegetable plants. Maybe not so much for things like marigolds that are, you know, they're so hardy. I mean, they'll gets really cold in the fall and they're still blooming. But to harden off your plants, I'll bring up my veggie plants and the marigolds that I grow, and I'll put them in the garage with the door open, out of the sunlight for 1 or 2 days. All I'm trying to do is acclimate them to the temperature. I'll leave the garage door open, but I'm trying to acclimate them to the temperature. And I'm probably not doing this until the first or second week of May. Early May is when I'm probably doing this. Then it's gradual sun exposure, 1 to 2 hours per day for a couple of days, then double the exposure. And if it's a really hot sunny day, you want less exposure because you don't want to burn them. What you're trying to do is get the plants used to being outside. I then, after the sun exposure, I pull them back into the garage. I actually have a garden weight cart, I put them in the cart, so I'm just wheeling it in and out. After a week or so of gradual to full sun exposure, you can usually leave them out as long as we're not getting a night in the 30s. You can leave them out at night if the nights are in the 50s. I put them underneath a tree, so they're not getting excessive sun. I just leave them out underneath the tree until I'm ready to plant them. But make sure you keep watering them, and I try to use the weed fertilizing solution. The plants that you buy at a garden center have been hardened off. So you do not have to worry about that. They have been hardened off in that. Check your seed packages for outdoor planting times. Peas will go in the ground really right about now. In fact, when I was delivering meals today, one of the men who gardens said, "Did you put your peas in yet?" I go, "Nope, Sunday." It was too cold last week. And do not rush your tomatoes, peppers, or eggplants. If you plant them in the ground too early, they may rot. And it is so tempting when we get to the second week of May and we're having that week that is 70 degrees and we go, "I can put it's been Mother's Day, I can put those plants out." Don't do it. Wait a little bit. My rule of thumb is right around Memorial Day, depending on how warm May has been. And I have sometimes experimented and put some in earlier and then put some in at Memorial Day, and guess what? They catch up. In fact, the ones I put in later did better. So in general, here's sort of the things that go in the ground, like early April, you can put in spinach and radish and lettuce, not if we're gonna be under freezing on lettuce, but peas and onions. And then sort of mid-May are the potatoes, the carrots, the cabbage. And then your later, which is very late May or early June, are things like sweet corn, peppers, snap peas, tomatoes, cucumbers, pumpkin, your herbs go in around Memorial Day. So let me wrap this up. Things to remember, as I just said, your peppers and eggplants and tomatoes are warm weather. Don't plant them too early. Remember that tomatoes are really heavy eaters. I actually use tomato tone. Again, it's in the Spoma product. I fertilize them when I plant them, and then I fertilize them every 3 weeks thereafter. Right until probably the first or second week in August, I'm fertilizing them. Only use organic fertilizer on your veggies. I don't mean to be a advertisement for a Spoma. There are many organic fertilizers that are out there that you can use. And don't compost diseased plant material. I don't care how disease resistant native plants are, there's always going to be some disease leaves. Don't compost them. Just throw them in the garden, yes.
About, I can't remember exactly, maybe 10 years ago or something, we had a really bad summer. There was a tremendous infestation of the tomato blight. A lot of people had a problem. I have since changed all my soil and my beds and everything, and I'm still fighting it off.
Yeah, you know, it's hard. That's what they say is, excuse me, with the tomato blights, you really have to pick those leaves off on the plant Because what happens is if they get on the ground, and even if you're diligent about getting them on the ground, it rains and it goes into the soil. It's just such a pain in the neck. And you're right, we had a couple years ago where it was just miserable. I spray with the copper. I spray almost every 2 weeks with a copper to be a fungicide. And I spray the tomatoes, anything that's vining, cucumbers, squash, pumpkins. I do that. My one story that I tell is the first year I was in a community garden, I had the most beautiful squash plants. Oh my goodness, they were great. I had this whole bed of them. And I went away for a week, the third week in September. And what happens is, the wind brings up the powdery mildew from down south. Nothing we can do about it. Comes up on the wind. I came back, looked like an elephant had rolled from the garden, is what it looked like. I mean, it was flattened. And fortunately, the fruit that was there was still okay. And there were enough leaves that they survived, but it went from this lush, oh, I was so proud of myself to just, it was flat, it was amazing. So, the powdery mildew, again, I use copper, I spray it, I'm really diligent about spraying it. And
Just use copper?
well, it's a, use the, if you go to the garden center, it's a liquid. And you mix it by the gallon into a pump sprayer. Yeah, and it's, yeah, it's organic. And it's pretty inexpensive.
Cause there's another one that's in a red bottle. It's
Yeah, Serenade,
Serenade.
yeah, Serenade's good too. It's a fungicide, it's organic, same thing. I've used Serenade too. I didn't see any difference between copper and Serenade, and copper is like a third of the cost.
I like the copper. I don't mean to take away, but
Yeah,
can I ask
no,
another
that's-
question? Last year, the first time I had a lot of, my grandkids love cucumbers, they eat them by tons. Last year, I must have had 9 or 10 hills of cucumbers. All of a sudden, they just died.
It was not.
I saw some cucumber beetles, and I don't know if they spread the disease, but they all just yellowed out and died.
It was a bad year for cucumbers last year. I don't know what it was. Some years we have a bumper crop of cucumbers. Last year was bad for cucumbers. I was trying to grow enough to make pickles and I didn't have enough to grow for pickles. I barely had enough for table use.
So I wasn't alone.
You weren't alone because even I've got a friend who's a phenomenal gardener who lives in Westport, which is over towards Dartmouth, Mass, and same thing. She said the cucumbers were not good. Usually she's taking bags of them to her post office just for people to take because she has so many. She said the same thing, that she barely had enough for the table. And there is a cucumber beetle. And you can check the garden centers. There are certain things that you can use that help with that. I don't know what they are right offhand, and the label will say how close to germination or how close, you can spray to use it, but.
If anybody's interested, that little beetle's about the size of a ladybug, but it's oblong.
Yeah,
And it's got a couple little stripes on its back.
yeah, it does, yeah, I know exactly what you mean, and yeah, they'll kill the plant, so, yeah, no, you're right. Okay, let's see, perennials, trees and shrubs, the garden centers are starting to get them in. This is a great time to plant them. Fall is also good. They start to run sales in the fall. Fall is also good. Annual plants you want to put in after the danger of frost, usually May, depending on the weather. And remember that plants need about an inch of water a week and that pots will dry out before in-ground. And heat makes things dry out faster. Very young plants need more water. So when you're first planting your garden, you need to give them more water so that they can develop that root structure and really thrive. And the last things I would say is grow what you like to eat. I always get suckered in, and it seems like when the seed catalogs come and there's some new something that would be wonderful to grow, and I plant it, and then I go, why did I plant that? But plant what you grow, keep your garden diary, don't overcrowd your plants, raise beds, you can plant more densely than you can plant in the ground, and if you are crowding things out, they don't get enough air or light, and they promote disease and a poor yield. So actually, this is a case of less is more a lot of the time. And condition your soil every year. Like I said, compost is your friend. Test for your pH. Test pH every couple of years. Create a garden design. There are multiple websites that can help you do garden designs. Just, look out there, and if it works, good. If it doesn't, do something different. For most plants, unless they're shade loving, more sunlight is better. We said young plants will dry out, they need more water. And you can maximize your yield by doing some successive plantings. And one example that I use is potatoes. Generally, you can harvest them in early to mid-August. If I grow potatoes, and usually the only ones they grow are those little fingerlings that are so expensive in the farmer's market. I grow them in grow bags. I tip them out on a tarp, and it's like an Easter egg hunt, finding all the little tomatoes. I put the soil back in, and I grow Brussels sprouts in it. And by late October or Thanksgiving, I have Brussels sprouts. Lettuce is something you can do some successive plantings with too. So you can maximize that way your space. Keep the weeds out. They steal the water, they crowd your plants, they take the nutrients, they take the fertilizer. Be diligent. And if you have limited space, I'm not positive. Do we have a community garden in East End? I didn't think so. There are 2 in Orleans, but have to be a resident. I kept lobbying that over at
tea time? You should have one.
Well, and the other thing is right by the courthouse. There's Putnam Farm.
Yeah, those are huge plots.
Those are huge plots, but what I was saying is the town could rent a couple of those big plots and divide them into smaller plots for people to have. The Putnam Farm, the community gardens, they have water there. They usually bring in some compost. And if you have questions, always remember that there's a helpline with a horticultural clinic at the Cape Cod Cooperative Extension. You just have to look up the phone number. They're manned by master gardeners, or you can email them, and it's a free service. That's something that's really good to use. And don't forget to add some flowers near your vegetable plants to help attract our pollinators. Always a good thing. So that's all I have. What questions do we have?
So do you companion plant any flowers in your vegetable beds? Like, somebody told me to put nasturtiums with my tomatoes.
There's so much controversy over that. Some people swear by it and others don't. The only thing that I've seen that was effective was if you have a lot of rabbits, which a lot of people do. Rabbits don't like stuff with scents. They don't like, for instance,
Marigold.
yes, exactly. So some people will put marigolds around the outside of the bed, try to deter the rabbits. But
Okay. I did it last year and I didn't see any difference at all.
yeah, I've never seen a difference either with companion planting, so.
but the nasturtiums look really pretty.
They do, and you can put them in the salad. Yeah, you need to put them in the salad. I saw a hand there, that I'll come back to you. Go ahead, I saw a hand back here somewhere, did I? No, okay, then I'll come here, go ahead.
Is there a rule of thumb for how long to water a raised bed?
Fewer waterings deep are better than a bunch of shallow waterings. So, what I would say is when you water, put your finger in the soil and see if it feels damp down, you know, to lengthen your finger.
You don't water every day, or no?
Pardon me, I don't mean to interrupt, but somebody has a champagne colored Outback in here? Your read right one?
A what?
Outback.
Champagne colored Outback. No?
Champagne colored Outback car.
Okay, sorry, it's just that their alarm is going off, so.
We don't want to get battery. Yeah, fewer deep waterings are better. My veggie gardens, I actually have irrigation under that black part. And we would run it for, now that's a big garden. You saw how big that garden is. We run it for an hour, 3 times a week. And that's in the ground. So, but yeah, you just, and so much of it depends on how hot it's been, how much rain it's got. You know, if we're getting an inch of rain, if we're lucky enough to get an inch of rain a week, you don't have to give hard penny extra water, then. So there's just so many variables that are there. Other questions? Go ahead.
I wanted to ask about cedar trees. I have a lot of cedar trees, that's what I'm taking down, but the ones that I have been, cut up to where, so there's one I'd like to encourage now to just grow back on the bottom. Is that possible for it to grow on the bottom again?
No, usually with fir trees, once it's trimmed up, it's pretty much, it's.
Okay, very good.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Question, I spent last summer, fighting with bittersweet, and the bittersweet won. So now it's growing, and is there anything I can do to win?
You know, bittersweet is such an issue, and the problem with bittersweet is it has those tendril roots. If you don't get all the tendril roots, it's almost impossible to get out. The only thing that I can say, with bittersweet that I have seen be effective, and I want to say this and say it very cautiously, because I don't like herbicides. You can take full strength, something like Roundup, and cut off the bittersweet, maybe a couple inches above the ground, cut it off and paint it with a paintbrush, with a concentrated, something like Roundup. And just where it's cut, you know, not spraying the ground or anything else. You're just taking a little tiny, like a child's paintbrush that they use with watercolors or something, and dab it on to where you just cut it. And it's gotta be a fresh cut. You cut it, you dab it. And I've seen that work, because what that does is it draws the herbicide right down into the roots. But it is hard to get it out. It is really miserable. And you know what? The birds eat the seeds, and then they spread it. What do birds do? They poop. So, and that's a lot of times how the seeds be cooked and go, how did that bittersweet get in my garden? And a lot of times that's it. So, but that would be the only thing that I would say. It's tough to get rid of, you've got to be diligent about it. Other questions?
Just a comment of bittersweet. I had a friend who bought this beautiful bittersweet wreath and put it on her front.
Ooh.
I had no idea. And it just,
Oh.
all over.
Yeah.
Oh, she was so upset.
Self-inflicted wound, right? Yeah. You need to buy one that is plastic, not real, not live, so.
Well, thank you.
And I have.
Thank you. Oh, go ahead. Back here, then I'll come up. Go ahead.
I just want to thank you, Danielle. We were talking about the peonies. I want to be master gardener, lectures. So I went and I listed up all
Yeah.
my peonies.
Yeah,
And, you know, put them up. They are coming up. They are.
Perfect.
So,
good.
Thank you.
Yay, yay.
Somebody in my backyard cut down every tree on their new property. What can I plant for privacy?
Privacy planting, yeah, I was gonna say arborvitae's
The
or,
green giant?
yeah,
They get really, really big though.
they get big. So do, my dreaded lelands that my neighbors planted behind me. The one that I particularly like that doesn't get overly big is called an emerald green arborvitae. And they don't get huge and the deer don't tend to like them too much if you've got a rich, and they have a nice shade. And they're very pretty because they're a dark green. So I like the emerald greens personally.
See, I've got oaks on my property. Can they be planted among oaks?
They need, how much sun do you
I
get?
get a lot of sun.
Okay, they'd be okay. They'd be okay. Just put lots of compost in the soil when you plant them.
Birds love them.
Yeah, the birds like them. The birds really like them. Well, happy gardening. Enjoy. Take it
Doesn't it look wonderful? Oh my God, that only person is on.
I know, I know. Isn't it like that? Isn't it
I know, yeah.
What give me like
Oh,
I saw the peak behind. Yeah, thanks. Oh, no.